I had 10,000 hours on this video game called Rainbow Six Siege. To put that into perspective, that's about 416-ish days. That's 13 and a half months. I would wake up in my bed at 10 AM and not leave it till 1 PM. I was so self-conscious that I couldn't even go outside. What changed? So there's 3 really important ways on how to diminish these bad habits. You can either cold turkey, which is pretty difficult on paper, but I think I found a way to go about it which I found really effective and might really help you guys, and I'll explain it later when I actually go into detail. A second one is progressive deloading, and there's a third way as well, which I think some of you guys will find a lot easier, and I'll explain that later in the video. Right, number 1, to destroy bad habits. Going straight cold turkey. Now, when you think about it on paper, I think it's really difficult. It's literally as basic as it sounds. Whatever bad habit that you have, you're going to stop doing it. Just that's it. You don't do it anymore. It doesn't exist to you anymore. I think the easiest way to go about it, or the most typical way to go about it, would be you telling yourself that that bad habit doesn't exist. So when you're presented with this stimulus for you to go and do that bad habit, you have to rewire your brain and tell yourself that habit doesn't exist anymore. Even though it might, obviously, but it's just about rewiring your brain to understand that if this happens, I can't do this bad habit anymore because it doesn't exist. As much as that's applicable in the short term, it's difficult to actually rewire your brain. It takes a long period of time. Another way that I think I found really important when it comes to cold turkey is that you should find things to do to replace those activities. Most of the time people do bad habits because they're bored, right? So if you find things to fill what you do in the meantime, then you're going to stop putting yourself in line with the stimulus that pushes you to do the bad habits. So for example, the stimulus may be that when you're scrolling on Instagram and you come across a degenerate Western woman, you decide to go watch some porn. If you do things other than scrolling on Instagram, such as reading a book, playing a guitar, learning how to solve the Rubik's Cube, writing, journaling, going out with your friends, you're going to be less exposed to the stimulus and you're less likely to do the bad habits. All those dopamine craving degenerates have probably clicked off the video now because they expected some quick route into finding a way on how to cut off all their bad habits, but the point is that it's not quick. That's why it's valuable to be able to cut them off. Think about it, if you've been doing a bad habit for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 15 years of your life, how do you expect yourself to stop within the next day, the next week, the next month? It's going to take a long time to cut them off, but eventually when you do cut them off, you can reap the long-term benefits of cutting them off. Okay, path number 2. Now I mentioned it as progressive deload. Some of you guys that go to the gym will probably know the term progressive overload. Progressive overload is essentially when I add a slight bit of weight or another rep to an exercise that I'm trying to improve. So say for example I'm doing dumbbell bench press. With the dumbbells, every session that I have, I will try to add another rep with the weight I'm doing, or I'll try and increase the weight with the exercise. So say I'm doing 32 kilos, then I want to do them for 10 reps, so I did them for 10. The next session I want to do them for 11 or 12. And after I hit 12, I'll try and increase the weight and I'll go to 34s. Then I'll do that for 10, then I'll do that for 11, then I'll do that for 12. And that's progressive overload, and you'll get stronger in the process. Now if you think that in the opposite way, where you have progressive deload, a deload is essentially when you cut back on high intensity training and you do less so that your body can recover. So progressive deload in the sense is that you'll be slowly cutting back on your high intensity bad habits. So an example would be, say you're playing video games for 5 hours a day. Every 2 or 3 days, you'll cut back an hour of how much you play. for some of you guys coping out there, maybe half an hour, okay? So every 2 or 3 days, we'll start with 5 hours. 2-3 days later, 4 hours, 4.5. And then 2-3 days, 3 hours. 2-3 days, 2 hours. Eventually, even when you get to the 1 hour point, you'll think that there's no point of you playing anyways. And this, especially if you mix it with the first point that I gave you, about finding other things to do in the meantime, the time that you're cutting back without playing video games, you have extra time to do other things. So if you find something else to do in the meantime, and you fill that gap, you'll see less sense in playing video games, especially if you enjoy these other activities. So over time, you'll get used to playing less and less and less. And eventually you'll just cut them off. Right, the third path. I think this is the most effective path, and it's the one that's worked the best for me, and you guys will probably find the easiest to implement. And you could do that as soon as you watch this video, you can implement it. So the third path is identifying as someone who doesn't do the bad habits. Okay, let me explain this. You can take this to the extremes. So, say I identify as an athlete, right? What does an athlete do? They sleep well, they eat well, they train hard. Okay. These are 3 criteria to be an athlete. If I identify as an athlete, I need to do the habits of an athlete so I can identify and justify my identity of myself. It doesn't have to go into those extremes, right? Because you could simply just say, I identify as someone who doesn't do these bad habits. I identify as someone who doesn't jack off. I identify as someone who gives their homework in on time. It's like you can give yourself an identity and rewire your brain to think of yourself in a certain way. It's essentially forging your self-image again. What people don't realize is that your self-image is very malleable. But it takes time to break it down, right? It takes time to eventually be like, okay, I need to carve it this way, and this is going to be my self-image from now on. It takes time to implement it, but if you repeat it enough times, then you're rewiring your brain to think a certain way. You have to constantly remind yourself that your habits don't control you. You have control over your habits. These are things that you do, your actions, and you're acting on emotions to do these actions. But all you have to do is remind yourself that you have power and control over your actions and emotions. You can't let them control you, because if they control you, then you end up getting yourself involved in nonsensical, hedonistic whims, which will break your life down to pieces. And no one wants that. Learn to control your actions. Rewire your brain. These bad habits don't have power over you. If you don't want to do a bad habit and you really don't want to do it anymore, you can stop. It's just about how much effort you're willing to put in to actually cut them out and rewire your brain and forge yourself a new identity. And that's really important. Hope you guys found some value in this video. And if you did, there's a lot of others I've done in the past few days which I think can help you as well, especially if you're on your self-improvement journey. You can maybe relate to some of the things, some of the stories that I have. And on that note, I'm out.